Hey guys, Becky here, FiveTwoBaker. Welcome back. This week I am back with this peony, but this time we are going to be working on all of the green parts on this. So we'll be working on the calyx and the leaves. And don't worry if you don't have any of the botanically correct cutters or veiners. I don't either. I'm just going to use what I have, and so I'll share that with you guys. So for this, some of the most important things you'll need is some green gum paste or flower paste. The peony cutters, I'll be using the smallest petal cutter. It looks very much like a rose petal cutter, so you can use that. A mini fondant rotary tool, a few 30 gauge floral wires, and then a thicker 28 gauge floral wire. To start off, I'll be cutting my 30 gauge wires to size, and so I just put it against the cutter, make sure it goes about halfway up the cutter, and then add another inch and a half excess so that I have wire to attach to my main carrier wire, which will be the flower stem. I go ahead and make sure I have 6 pieces in total, and this doesn't have to be exact. If you end up with a few long ones like I did, that's totally fine. It just wasn't worth cutting off and having 2 little pieces of scrap wire. The next thing I'll be working on is the calyx itself. So I grab a little piece of green gum paste or flower paste. I place it in between 2 flaps of a Ziploc bag, and then I roll out the sides and the top, leaving a thick center where I will insert my floral wire. You could of course use a veining board for this, but I really enjoy this method because then I don't have to worry about my flower paste being exposed to too much air for too long, because once I cut out this shape, then I'm going to ball up the excess flower paste and use it again for the next shape. So the less air exposure, the better. Once I have that nice thick center, I make sure that it goes right in the center of my rose cutter and it lines up perfectly with the bottom. Then I just go ahead and stamp it out. Now with one of my 30 gauge wires, I go ahead and dip one end of the wire into some edible glue, wipe off the excess, and I thread it right through the thick center. Then pinch the bottom to make sure it's secured. Now we have to go ahead and thin out these edges just a bit. So I dust it with a little bit of cornstarch so it doesn't stick to my rolling ball tool, and using the large end of my rolling ball tool, I'll just slightly tug at the edges so that they come out. I also don't want a perfectly round shape, so that's why I'm doing more of tugging rather than rolling. Now I don't have a specific veiner for the calyx or even a botanically correct peony veiner, but I will be using this rose veiner because it's close enough and it leaves a very soft vein, which I like. I go ahead, pop it in, squeeze it, and then put it back on my foam board, and using the end of a Dresden tool, it doesn't matter if it's the large or the thin end, I go ahead and tug at the edges to give it a more aged and ripped look. I just want it to look less perfect and a bit more natural. These are the oldest part of the peony, and so I want them to look that way. Once I'm happy with how it looks, I'm going to put it to dry, and I want it to have a bit of a cup shape, so I'm just going to use this small silicone mold that I have, and it's a little tighter than I'd like, so it's just going to sit on top sort of floating so that it has a light round shape. Now I go ahead and repeat this process 2 more times, so I have a total of 3 calyx parts that look like this. Now for the rest of the calyx, the other 3 parts are not going to look like the first 3. These remind me more like a rose calyx. They're a bit more triangular in shape, But to start off, it's the same process. We're going to roll our paste so that it has thin sides, a thin top, and a skinny but thick center for us to be able to thread our wire. Once I have that center ready, then using my gem rotary fondant cutting tool, I'm not exactly sure what the proper name is, I go ahead and cut out a shape that looks like one of the ends of a rose calyx. And then same process again, using the 30 gauge wires that we cut in the beginning, I'll go ahead and add some edible glue to one end, wipe off the excess, and then thread it in that thicker middle of my calyx part. I pinch the bottom to the wire to make sure it's secure. And then if my edges are a bit blunt or thick, I'll go ahead and put it on a foam board and use a rolling ball tool to thin that out a bit. But in this instance, it was very thin already, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop it into my rose veiner. Now that it's out of the rose veiner, I'm just going to go ahead and make some minor adjustments. So I cut a little bit of scraggly slits on the side. If it comes out thicker than I'd like or a bit wider, then I can go ahead and cut it down to size using some small scissors at this point as well. And once I'm happy, I go ahead and put it to dry. I'm going to dry it in the same silicone mold as I used for the first part of the calyx, just so that it dries in a bit of a wave shape. Now for the leaves, in case some of you don't really like the Ziploc bag method, I'm going to go ahead and use the veining board. It works just as well, but the center is a little bit thinner and I sometimes have trouble threading my wires through, but this is a good time saver because it does all of the work for you. Once I have my veins, just like with the second half of the calyx tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and use the rotary tool that I have to cut out some long leaf shapes. The peony leaves are just about like this, so this is what I'm going to do. You could of course look up pictures and use a model, but I'm going to go ahead and freehand this. Now that I have my leaves all cut out, using the 28 gauge wires, I'm going to go ahead and dip one end in some edible glue, wipe off the excess, and thread it through that thicker center. I thread mine about 1/3 of the way through. If your flower is larger and heavier, you might need to do more. If it's smaller and thinner, you might need to do less. Thread it as much as feels comfortable for you. Once it's in there, I go ahead and pinch the bottom to secure it to the wire. Now because my leaves are pretty thin already, I'm not going to do any more thinning with the rolling ball tool, and I'm just going to pop it right into a veiner. This isn't a peony veiner, it's just a generic leaf veiner, but I don't know that anyone will call me out on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this because it's what I have at the moment. Then I give the sides a bit of a squeeze just to give the leaf a little bit more shape, and I place it to dry on a wavy foam board. Now, once all of my pieces are dry, or at least mostly dry, comes the fun part of adding some color and life to them. So to start off, I'm going to add a darker rose green, and I start at the very base of my calyx and I blend it towards the top. I don't blend it even so that it's a perfect arch. I blend it so that there's some up and down movement to the color. For these rounder calyx pieces, because they'll be close to the petals and no one will see the inside, I will only be dusting the outside. For my longer calyx pieces, I'll start off the same way with the dark green at the base and then just dragging and blending the color towards the top, not really being even with all of this. I want some color variation, but because on these pieces you will see the inside, I go ahead and add some green on the inside as well. The next color I'll be adding is a bright red because my green is a little dark, so I want the red to show up a little bit more. And to add this red, I'll be using a flat brush so that I have more of just streaks of red. I go along the top edges and then just blend a few streaks down. Again, just for some color variation and so that it looks a bit more natural. This red I'll do more on the rounder calyx pieces and a little bit less on the longer calyx pieces. Now that I'm ready to add the calyx pieces to my peony, the first thing I'm going to do is close my peony flower, so bring in all the petals towards the center so they're not flapping around and in my way. I wouldn't want them to break while I'm doing this. And once they're all closed, I'll go ahead and start wrapping the tape around the base of the flower as close to the base of the petals as I can. I wrap it around a few times, and then I'm going to make sure that when I add my calyx parts one at a time, they go in a pattern of round, long, so and so until it makes it all the way around. I prefer to add the 3 rounded calyx parts first in a triangular shape, and then add my longer pieces in between those. But whatever is most comfortable for you, as long as it goes in that order, it'll be great. Once they're all on there, I just go ahead and drag my tape all the way down. Now for the leaves, using the fluffy brush, I'm just going to dust on some of my dark rose leaf green. And I'll focus more on the center and the edges and just blend everything out from there, just so I have some color variation and it doesn't look like a single color flat leaf. Now to assemble the leaves, I'm just going to go ahead and have one leaf be the main leaf in the center and then 2 leaves be on the sides. So one will be higher up and then the other will go a bit further down. And I'll make sure to attach them all with some green floral tape. I'll start off by attaching the floral tape to the main center leaf. Twist it around a few times and then add the next leaf, twist it around a few times, and when I reach the height that I'd like the third one to be at, I add the third one, and then roll the tape all the way down the stem. Now here I've changed my mind and I've decided to take some of the tape off of my leaves and just go ahead and attach it to my flower. So right where I want the leaf to bend, where I want it to meet the stem of the flower, that's where I'll stop the rolling of my tape. And then I go ahead and attach it to my flower, roll the tape around a few times, and then I bring the tape between the leaf stem and the flower stem and wrap it around some more. This extra step just makes sure that I don't have that open gap of space when I bend my leaf out. It's not totally necessary, but I like the look of it, so that's why I do it. And then I go ahead and roll my tape all the way down the stem of the flower. And that's it. Here goes the final flower. Of course, it was pretty without any of the greenery, but I think the greenery just adds so much to it. And if your flowers are showing enough on a cake, I think it's really worth this extra step. So thank you to everyone who requested I share this. As always, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please do give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. I would super appreciate that. It helps so much. And if you have any questions, please do drop them down in the comments below and I'll make sure to get back to you. If not, I will see you guys for the next tutorial.